Hello and welcome to the farm here in Delhi. This is George Brenneman, and I have with me our friend Keith.
Hello, everybody.
We're going to get things started tonight with a little update on what's going on in the Restore Wellness arena, what's been going on at the national level, and then maybe some insight on how you can get motivated to make some personal change. So, Keith, let's get started with last week. There was a report released from HHS. It's the Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy report. I think straight off the bat, the first thing we can say is there were no surprises in any of this.
Right. A lot of people, are kind of saying, well, where are the interventions? Is this all fluff or talk? But this is the first time they've really taken a strong, direct derivative towards our children. And they address some very, very good bullet points that I hope that gain momentum, and especially on the local level where people say, okay, well, you said that we could do this. Let's doing it.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, right.
So let's start off. Some of the key findings was our children have a poor diet. Is anyone surprised by that? In the world of Pop-Tarts and chicken nuggets and Happy Meals, are you surprised that the biggest problem with children is their diet? The second thing they call environmental exposures. Now, I don't think this one's just children. It's pesticides, forever chemicals, the environmental toxins.
The plastics in the food and in the beverages as well, right?
Right. And then the third thing is physical inactivity and stress. It's interesting that they would put physical inactivity with stress.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When you look at the science behind how cortisol is reduced when you exercise, and obviously, therefore,
so cortisol is a stress hormone.
That's right. Yeah, very good.
So if you're not working out, then you're going to feel bad.
Yeah, right.
And then the last thing was over-medicalization, meaning kids get all these prescriptions. I've seen it in many areas where you'll see the kid that's got to go to the nurse's office every day, or he's been diagnosed with ADHD, which is kind of what drove this report in the first place. But and that's the only place where they talk a little bit about vaccines. I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, I find that the whole concept of medication, ADHD is probably one of the highest diagnoses among our children, and then you look at situations where they're required to sit in a desk all day and screens and all this other stuff, and they're not doing physical activity. So they're young kids. They're going 1,000 miles a minute, and their body's telling them, "Hey, let's go do something," and they're required to sit in this spot. So I think some of that ADHD isn't necessarily a pathological ADHD. I think it's a whole system of the way we're raising our kids that's causing some of this hyperactivity.
You probably can't get any further away from the one-room schoolhouse in the farm. Yeah. I mean, back then you got up, you did your chores, you went to school, and you probably stood most of the time there, and then you went home and did some more chores.
Right, and you were walking far distances or whatever it might be in that that wonderful weather. I saw a funny meme on TV, like, hey, we captured our mom and dad going to school, and it was a picture of people climbing Mount Everest.
Well, both directions were uphill, right?
Right, exactly.
But I mean, that is kind of the point. Is the major changes since. Certainly since I was a kid, McDonald's had just come around. I mean, we still have White Castle, but you knew better than to eat too much of that. It kind of self-regulated even today.
I had this kind of interesting thought. I said to myself, we want to be a world leader as a country. We want to be out there and be better than China. We want to be better than Russia. We want to be better than anybody who wants to compete with us. And, Trump's talking about our financial gains and what we're doing with tariffs and how we're leading the nation in there. But we have to think 15, 20 years ahead. And if we want to raise a really good country, we have to give nutrition to our children. Our children have to have a quality nutrition so that their bodies are healthy, their minds are getting fed what they need to, and that way they can learn better and they can be given this motivation and they have the energy to motivate themselves to lead, in all the spaces that education is trying to offer them. But if you give them chemicals, you're giving them poor sugars and the whole gamut of poor food just to feed them, then you're going to get a low product on the end. What goes in comes out. And right. So I think it's a very important initiative, and I think we should all be focusing on really feeding our children the highest quality food that we can so that they can benefit themselves and then therefore the country in the future. You can't run or be a leading culture with sick children.
Right, and the fact that they've been inundated with this since birth. I mean, they get all the vaccines the moment they're born. They come home, they get formula. They come home, they get as they grow up, they get the chicken nuggets and the potato
Right.
chips and everything else.
Now, I have to admit, with the patients that I see in the wellness environment and the moms that are bringing their children to me, or the moms and dads that are bringing their children to me, I really get excited because some of these people are doing it right. They're doing grass-fed beef and chicken and raw milk and doing all the precautions to stay away from all these foreign, chemicals, if you will. And I love those kids. And often they're probably either homeschooled or they're doing some form of private education as well. But that doesn't matter as far as I know that the culture's out there. I know I'm seeing more of it and more people are getting invested.
Well, and again, I think a lot of people are waking up. I just saw Dr. Lufkin, who we're going to interview next week. Yeah. That's a big deal. He just posted on X about, when the tobacco companies bought the food companies and immediately went about trying to make the food more addictive. Mm-hmm. Hence vegetable oil, hence the high-fructose corn syrup, where your body thinks it's sweet, but it doesn't get rid of your hunger pains. Right. I mean, from a point of view of trying to sell more food, it's a genius move to go to high-fructose corn syrup. But they just said, I just saw a thing in the press today, Dan Marino now has fatty liver disease. High fructose corn syrup. That's the only way you can get that anymore, non-alcoholic.
Right. I found it very interesting if you were to break down the food, let's say a product costs $10 for a particular food, how much of that money is going towards, advertisement to make you want to buy that food? How much money is going towards the chemists that they're paying to make that food more addictive? How much are they spending on selling that product to your public industries such as schools and such? I mean, right. So really, what's your money doing when you buy that product? So, let your money talk and make sure you're buying a good product, and then let the rest of it hopefully fade into the dark.
So there was no surprises in their list of root causes: the diet, the environment, lack of physical, and too much medicine. That made just total sense. The first recommendation in there was nutrition and food access. To me, food access is a weird thing to bring in all these other social issues, but certainly nutrition. And it always, to me, comes down to the fact that the food pyramid that came out when we were in school was upside down from the get-go. It was totally the wrong thing to do.
Again, like you talked about the high fructose corn syrup initiatives and the soy initiatives, and it's pretty depressing when we look at it, and it's that slow fade. So, what I really encourage people to do is to get local, is to get on those boards that they're having these discussions with, the parental boards, and really start caring and advocating for your children, to get out there and say, we want to address school lunches today or this week or this month, and don't give up, and really push the local schools to make those adjustments as they will too. Obviously, it's a cost ratio, but we just need to make more funding for that. Another aspect is the physical education. The physical inactivity, if you look, it seems like we're all promoting these sports afterwards. Right? So they say, well, that's why we have sports. We have soccer, and we have this, and we have that, and we have that. So in the meantime, sit in class all day. Right. You can't do that. I mean, if you think about
undo that 6 and 6 or 8 hours of sitting down all day.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the culture today, how many of us sit? We wake up in the morning, we sit in our car, right? And then we drive to work, and then we sit at work, and then we get back in the car, sit, and we come home, and we cook dinner or whatever, and we sit down to eat. At which point in time are you working out? Which point in time are you exercising? And I think the school systems is just cultivating more of that same time as sitting situations. And if we don't break that cycle and show our children, hey, we need to be active, we need to spend every day being, in the exercise realm, then they don't understand the concept either. They're just being trained. And so having that good conversation with them, and then again, how do we change that on a local level with our schools? What are some ideas that you might think?
So there was a fad for a while of standing desks at work. I wonder what would happen if they tried standing desks at schools. That would be an interesting thing.
Yeah, it would be. Or how neat would it be if they spent, between bells, 10 minutes of running outside or running into the gym and, doing a few laps and getting back into the class. It'd be interesting if they did some research behind how it proves IQ.
So the interesting thing in 2012 or so is when Michelle Obama came out with her attack on the school lunch program. The interesting thing was they got rid of sugared soft drinks and replaced them with the only thing worse than a sugared soft drink, which is a diet soft drink.
Oh.
So, it's like...
Mike made a terrible decision with that. I'm sorry, Michelle, she should have not done that. What is diet? Diet, the nutritional chemical in there that, gets us addicted. It sits on our tongue and it makes our brain think that we want more and more of it, releases dopamine and such. But our body also gets confused and doesn't know what to do with it. And so therefore it stores it in forms of a foreign entity or foreign chemical. And, it causes cancer and or adipose tissues and these little lipomas and cysts and God knows what, So diet pop is not good. Pop is not good. For those who really, really enjoy beer, I highly consider you reconsider that one just because of the gluten in America is, Roundup Ready. And so we're kind of drinking a liquid chemical, carbohydrate, carcinogen, kind of thing there.
Just the soup you want.
Right. So I do apologize if I ruined your day with that one, but it tends to be one of those things. So let's talk about vaccines for a second.
Okay.
Everybody, we've talked about Florida, in their initiative to basically lift all mandates on vaccines. And I really think that that's a really good movement because, you have therefore now an option. If you want to be a vaccinated family or you want to vaccinate your kids against certain things because of the research that you did or maybe they come out with, a better alternative or whatever it might be, then you have that choice. But to mandate that and say you cannot attend this college or you cannot attend this school unless you indoctrinate your DNA with this particular chemical that you don't agree with. I mean, there's so many bad things about that mentality.
Well, the one that always comes to mind, what's the one that they're basically giving infants something that can only be
Hepatitis B.
Hepatitis B.
Yeah.
The fact that you're telling you have to give this baby a vaccine for something that can only be sexually transmitted.
Mm-hmm. Or blood transfusion, which by that time, it's not an issue. You're already testing the blood, and the blood's already been made sure that it doesn't have hepatitis B before they give it to you in the first place. So I find that to be very odd. Another initiative is the aluminum. People talk about, well, we all have aluminum in our food, we have it in our soil, so what's wrong with it being in the vaccine? And interestingly, that aluminum is a nano-sized particle aluminum. So it's a really small piece. So it does cross the blood-brain barrier, attaches to bacterial and viral components, and therefore brain components.
Why do they use it?
Because they use it as a carrier. And I don't quite understand it, but it allows the virus...
But it lets it into the cell because it's got aluminum on it.
Evidently. Or it has something to do with maybe part of the preservatives. But the fact that it's there and it causes the neurotoxicity, and that's why we're seeing higher rates of autism and Asperger's and, Downs and all those unfortunate situations. And then some people want to say, what can you do when you have a vaccine-injured child or patient? And the first thing I like to lean on is heavy metal detox, and there's a variety of alternatives out there. There's a lot of natural foods out there that can also do heavy metal detox, such as cilantro and chlorella, which is broccoli sprouts. And combining that with a good binder and stuff like that, you can really start to see some benefit. I have one friend of mine that did a heavy metal detox on their young child who was having some speech delays and immediately saw some improvement in cognitive abilities and having more of a conscious thought with their words and word choices. So I do see that there's a lot of benefit in that.
The whole idea of using food as a medicine is just extremely interesting, and it's almost like, why did we ever get away from that? Mm-hmm. Because, that's sort of where we came from as a species was, you knew to eat certain things in order to solve certain problems. And now we've been taught that you go to a doctor and you get a pill, and that's the only way to cure anything.
Remember it was a fad about a year ago where they're talking roughly about how 70% of the pharmaceutical medicines are prescribed in America. So 70% of those prescription medicines in the world are given to Americans, right? But yet, you would think that we would be the healthiest then if their medicines work, but we're actually one of the sickest things. And so when you take a kind of a global view back and you look, America has been polyfarmed, it's been polyfooded, it's been polychemicaled. We as Americans, unfortunately, are living in a bubble to think that we're great when it comes to our health initiatives. I talk to people who've traveled across the world, and the foods and the quality of foods are so much better, and the health of these people are so much better, and they're skinnier in general populations. Their BMI in general is lower as well. So that really makes us want to wake up and say, wait a minute, I thought we were world leaders, but we're not in the health space. And I'm hoping that RFK is really going to make us world leaders in the health space, just like Trump is making us world leaders in other ways.
And the key problem there is, I think, like the number 2 or number 3 lobbyist organization is big food. Yeah. Number 1's pharma, but number 2 or 3 is the big farm industries. And I don't think any other country in the world has trouble with gluten, but it's because we've bred or altered the DNA of our wheat to be so much more poisonous.
Yeah, it's all the people that I talk to that have traveled across the country and have come back to talk to me and, how was your trip to Europe or whatever it might be? They will say things like, we ate the heck out of pasta and bread and we lost weight. I mean, that is the, raise your hand if anybody has had that similar experience if you traveled. It's like, wow, they ate fantastic and they lost weight. And that just tells you something, that inflammation in our food is what's causing it.
Wow.
The bloating, the abdominal distension, the joint pain, it's all inflammation, and it's usually related to something we're consuming or taking in, whether it be through hydration, diet, or local environment.
So let's finish up with the last two they had there in this report. We talked about physical activity, the medical and pharmaceutical oversight, and the research and public awareness. Now, those seem like little ones, but the medical oversight thing is, why are we overprescribing to children in particular? We're overprescribing to everybody. Personal history, I once had a list of chemicals they were giving me that was, 10, 15 of them. And I finally just said enough is enough and just stopped on my own. But how many people have the time to do the research on why am I taking, for instance, a statin, or why am I taking a blood pressure medicine, and what happens if I don't?
Right. So, that's a really good point, George. I guess I want to ask this question to you, and then maybe the audience can really appreciate this. So you were on multiple medications, and your quality of life was at X.
Horrible.
And then now you're off multiple medications. What are your thoughts on that? How do you feel since then? And
in the last year, which is kind of what started this whole Restore Wellness thing, when we started reading the books and changing our diet, going to keto instead of eating carbs, infinitely better. I mean, it's night and day. I actually sleep some nights even. It's crazy.
Yep.
But nothing... I'm trying to think, did anything get worse? I don't think anything got worse.
Yeah. And if you kind of look at that, the side effects of medications and the way it impacts our kidneys and our livers over a long time, or subtle things, maybe it causes acidosis and causes coronary artery disease. And, the people who, have wonderful cholesterol still have heart attacks. I see it all the time too. So I would encourage you to maybe go using, if you'd like to use AI, take your medicines. You can literally take a picture of all the medicines on your table, put them out there so that the camera can see it, take a picture, send it up, upload it to AI so you don't have to type them in, and say, tell me about these medications and tell me if there's any interactions and what are the most common side effects of each medication. And it'll pop them all up, and you can just quickly read through it and be like,
Yeah, that's not going to be good news by the end, probably.
Right, exactly.
Overall, what are you thinking of the direction this is? For like you said at the beginning, this is the first time I'm aware of that HHS has done something specifically at children's health.
Yeah, I think they're making a good point of targeting our future. Our future relies on our children. And, you mentioned much about the medications that our kids are taking. And you look at the social pressure. You look at everybody trying to outperform each other, and how can I get my child to concentrate better, but yet they throw them in front of video games when they're at home, or on recess.
Or just the TV.
Right. And so again, we can have the government be part of that and make initiatives that they need to control, such as the mandates and lack of mandates, hopefully with the vaccines, and getting the right food in these public industries so that they have access to good food. But it's also the quality of what we're doing at home, too. And we have to be responsible for ourselves and our own children, and educating our children so they can wake up and they can see the importance of maybe, going and learning agriculture on their own and wanting to garden. So when they become young adults, they're thinking about, raising their own chickens and raising their children properly, too, So
I think it's a good first start.
Yeah, I do.
So let's go to the other topic we wanted to talk about, which was motivation, which is always the problem. I know when we're talking to Brian Thomas, his thing always is, I just don't feel like exercising. You are wanting to say some things about what is the way we can motivate ourselves, because you can't really have somebody else do it. It's got to come from inside your own being that you want to get better. What comes to mind?
Over the last 30 years, doing healthcare and seeing disease progression or the lack of people doing what, say, someone suggested, I had to find out what the root cause of that was. What is this one common denominator that takes a patient from doing the same thing every day and then changing it to the point where they can make changes in their health? There's a saying that I tell my patients, change your habits, you'll change your life. And then obviously the definition of the craziness is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And you kind of combine that two, and I see what is the main problem that doesn't get people off the couch. And that main problem, I believe, comes down to and this is going to change what we're kind of talking about here. So I hope that our audience is willing to kind of go here. But it is looking at the self and saying, why do I not deserve self-care? What about my upbringing? What about my conditional thinking that says, I don't really need to focus on my care towards myself. I know that I got to maybe take a medicine or keep my blood pressure under control, but why am I not going to the gym? Why am I not exercising? Why am I not looking for that high quality grass-fed beef or making sure that my water is filtered? I'm not just drinking, bottled plastic water and making these changes. I hear all these good things. You hear them on the radio all the time. You hear them, in your social media sites, especially if you're health conscious. But why am I not making those changes? And I believe it comes down to that model of self-care, self-love, self-respect, and how can we change that within ourselves? What are the roadblocks that prevent us from seeing that in ourselves?
The first thought that comes to mind is what they tell you when you get on the airplane. If in a case that we lose airplane pressure, put your mask on first before you do your child or someone next to you.
Right.
So the whole idea of self-care is how can I help the people around me if I don't help myself?
Right, exactly.
If I'm not in good health.
I think that there's this undertone of self-sacrifice where I'm just going to sacrifice my existence for the well-being of my family or for my friends,
right,
or whatever it might be. But if you really break that psychology down, maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's that you want to be a people pleaser and that you want people to like you so that you're going to give yourself of things that you don't even have. And then before you know it, you're drained.
And you don't have any impetus to do anything different.
Right. And so, I ask people to kind of do a soul search. And one of my neatest interventions, and it's a bit, one might think that it's, schizophrenic if you do this, but it's not. You look in the mirror. You go into a private area, a private bathroom, close the door, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, hey, Keith, right? I haven't seen you in a while. And I've been noticing that you kind of been talking crap to yourself. You've been, beating yourself up. You've been saying that you didn't do this right or you didn't do that right. And I'm kind of sick of hearing it, and you kind of got to get strong with yourself. You got to get hard with yourself. And you say, I'm going to start loving you now. I'm going to start loving the person that's in front of me. And I'm going to start giving you what you need. Healthy nutrition. And honestly, it's kind of a tough love because you're also going to say, and I don't care if you're uncomfortable. I don't care if you don't like that food. You need to eat that food, Keith, because it's important for your health. And the same thing goes with exercise. I don't feel like going to the gym. I don't care. I don't care that you don't feel like going to the gym. You need to go to the gym because you just spent the entire day sitting down. Right. And then people say, I've never been to a gym. Okay, cool. That's going to be kind of scary in the beginning, but go. And then you're going to love yourself in 3 months because what's interestingly happens in the space of self-care, in the beginning, as some of you have noted, I'm going to go work out. And you go work out and you feel great that day. Right? You get that dopamine hit or that runner's high and you're like, oh, that felt great. And the next day you woke up and you're like, oh, that doesn't feel so great. Right? But then you go to the gym again. And the next thing you know, you start to cultivate this healthy mentality by eating and drinking and going to the diet, or getting a proper diet and getting proper sleep. And your body starts to produce serotonin. And that serotonin is really a very powerful neurochemistry that your muscles are producing because you're actually working out. You're actually going to the gym. And now you become this manufacturing housing of serotonin that does nothing but make you feel better in so many different ways. It becomes your own drug. I once heard someone say, if you don't work for the dopamine, then it's an addiction. If you just, I want to crack a pop because it makes me feel good, that's an addiction. Versus working hard for that dopamine, going to work out, next thing you know, you earn it, or you clean out the closet and you feel good about cleaning out the closet, you earn that dopamine hit. And anyway, so after several weeks, maybe even a month or so, your body, because of that self-care, starts producing oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is that good feeling. It's that feeling you get when you get a good hug, And here you are now looking at the mirror, 3 months down the road, caring for yourself, and you're producing this wonderful chemical called oxytocin, and you look at that mirror and you smile at yourself, and you're like, hey, I like you now. I appreciate you now, and that radiates to people. Your family sees you doing self-care, and then they start doing self-care, and it becomes contagious. Now your energy's up, and you feel good, and you're able to help people genuinely. But at the same time, you have so much good self-care, you're also setting up healthy boundaries. You're like, you know what?
Maybe I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to get some sleep today. And it's not being selfish. It's preserving yourself so that you can continue to spread the care that you want to the people that you love. And so learning to love the self allows you to love others. And learning to love yourself motivates you to do all the right things for your existence. And if I was to take a poll, I would say, how many out there know what they need to do? How many people out there would say, hey, I got 5 things I know that I need to do, but I probably haven't done it yet. We're all thinking of those things. I could do this, I could do that. So, I highly encourage you to start doing those 5 things. And then make it 6, and then 7, and then 8. And before you know it, you've got this momentum that is just invigorating your life. And it can start at any age. 6, 7, 8 decades of life, they're available. It's not as easy.
So there's hope.
Right. There's very much hope. Very, very much hope.
Well, let's end on that one on a hopeful note. And if you want any extra information, you can go to restorewellness.org. Keith and I have got a lot of podcasts out there. There's some really good ones. Next Wednesday, we'll be recording a podcast with Dr. Robert Lufkin. His book is out on the website there at our website. You can look up what it's about. Super, super interesting guy. This should be fun.
Yeah.
Then Friday next week, we'll be on with Brian Thomas again. So you can catch us then. In the meantime, thanks for listening.